Okay, my name is Jonathan Tice. I'm a project manager in the bridge design section at DelDOT, and we're here to present to you today our plans for the replacement of what we call Bridge 3-164 on Cedar Beach Road over the Cedar Creek Canal. As we go through the presentation, you can write down questions in the Q&A box, which you should be able to find on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And we'll be able to answer back via text as the presentation is going on. At the end of the presentation, you'll have the chance to ask questions with your voice if you wish. So with that, I'm going to play our presentation for you here. And it's pre-recorded, so we'll be able to answer any questions you type to us in the chat, in the Q&A box.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the public meeting for the replacement of Cedar Beach Road Bridge over Cedar Creek Canal. My name is John Eberly, and I'm the Deputy Project Manager for AECOM, who's the prime consultant for this project. I'll be presenting today along with Rodney Jarrett, who's the Project Manager for Hardesty and Hanover, which is the sub-consultant handling the bridge design for the project. First, we just wanted to share some of the core principles that DelDOT follows with every project, including this one. These focus around striving to make all the trips within the state safe, reliable, and convenient. This is for all travelers, whether it be vehicular, by rail, bus, pedestrian, etc. They also strive to ensure that all projects provide the best value for the money being spent, and that all customers and employees are engaged. And that really focuses around the point of the meeting today to inform the public of the upcoming project and what's anticipated and to get some feedback. So first up, I'll be introducing the project and describing the project need and goals. This project is located at the outskirts of the town of Slaughter Beach. As you can see in the map view here, the existing bridge is comprised of a swing bridge, which is the movable bridge that rotates in plan view, as well as a short approach span on the east side of the structure. And the bridge crosses the Cedar Creek, as we can see here. The need for this project is centered around a few key points. The first of which being that heavy mariner traffic in the area makes this one of the most frequently operated of DelDOT's movable bridge inventory. This means that the new bridge is going to need to be a movable bridge as well. Next, the existing bridge is showing signs of deterioration and really has passed its useful service life and needs to be replaced. And lastly, increasing frequency of high water events in the area due to high tides and storm events is leading to the equipment for the structure being submerged. Being a swing bridge, the existing structure has its mechanical components that operate the bridge below the bridge. And these high water events are causing that equipment to become submerged, which leads to ongoing maintenance concerns. We're trying to eliminate that moving forward. Next, I'd like to go over some of the project objectives as well as the project cost. The first objective for this project is to provide operating components above the flood elevation. So as I mentioned, with the existing bridge, flooding of those mechanical components below the deck is a main issue leading to maintenance concerns. We want to make sure that that's not occurring with the new bridge. Next, we want to make sure that we're providing an aesthetically appealing structure, something that will really be a landmark in the area. And also tied to that is providing an operator's house that fits in well with the maritime setting and helps to complement the bridge itself. The new bridge is going to have a 75-year design life, so it's really going to last into the future and be here for generations. Again, reinforcing that point that we want to provide something that's going to be a landmark in the area. And the anticipated construction cost for this project is around $27 million. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Rodney, who's going to talk to you about the design of the new bridge.
Thank you, John. I'd like to provide a brief overview of the steps that our design team went through as part of the evaluation and selection of the movable bridge type for this replacement project. John had mentioned two of the project goals were to maintain the current roadway profile on the approaches and to keep the mechanical and electrical equipment as high as possible above the water lines. These two factors had a big influence on the bridge type and required that the bridge have a shallow superstructure, that the machinery and control systems also be located above the superstructure. This could be done with a vertical lift bridge and some styles of bascule bridges. The team determined that a Dutch-style bascule bridge offered a cost-effective way of meeting these goals. The Dutch-style bridge is more commonly used for pedestrian bridges in Europe, and it provides a simple and effective way to span small water crossings and canals. This project will be the first application of a Dutch-style bridge for vehicular use in the United States. As you can see from the picture on the left, this pedestrian bridge uses an overhead balance frame with a counterweight to help offset the weight of the span during an opening. The hydraulic cylinders on the towers push and pull the balance frame, which is linked to the movable span to open and close for boat passage. Our bridge on the right will use the similar concepts of hydraulic cylinders to open and close the span over the Cedar Beach Canal. The A-frame towers provide the structural capacity needed to support the overhead counterweight and the balance frame, which are needed to support this 39-foot wide by 45-foot long bascule span. On the left, you can see the bridge in the closed position. This is a 3-span bridge, and it has 2 concrete end spans on the abutments and a fender system that is mounted along the piers to protect the bridge and the boats during vessel passage. The graphic on the right shows the leaf in the raised position, which will allow for boat passage through the canal. The leaf opens to an 80-degree angle, which will result in the top of the balance frame being approximately 65 feet above the top of the road. Once the leaf starts to raise, it will take approximately 90 seconds to reach the full open position. As you can see in the open position, the bascule span will be a pre-assembled unit that is composed of 2 edge girders, which support the transverse floor beams and an orthotropic steel deck. This is a cross-section through the bascule span, showing the 1 lane of traffic in each direction, and an additional 5-foot shared use path on each side of the bridge. The riding surface on the deck will be a solid concrete surface in both the end spans, with a latex modified concrete overlay on the bascule span. And now I'd like to turn it back to John, who will discuss the bridge architecture.
So next, I'd like to talk about the architecture a little bit and walk through a few slides showing some of the renderings of the new bridge. So as Rodney mentioned, the inspiration for this bridge came from these Dutch-style bascules that are found over in Europe. It really provides a sleek and aesthetically appealing structure at this location. So this is one of the renderings. This is a rendering looking south. This is what you'd anticipate to see if you were traveling by boat through the area. Again, it's a really aesthetically pleasing structure. And then also wanted to touch here on the operator's house, which we can kind of see in the background here. We looked at a few alternatives for the operator's house, and what we selected was something that resembles a lighthouse in a horizontal form. So much of the cladding for the operator's house is a natural material on the outside, kind of resembles what you'd think of for a lighthouse with some masonry. And then it's kind of transferring into the waterway with the end of the house towards the waterway being surrounded entirely of glass, which really provides kind of the top of that lighthouse, which will form a navigational beacon, not only for, travelers, but from the road, but also the vessels traveling through from the water. So here we have a rendering looking north. Again, we see the form of the bridge here from the waterway or from the land adjacent to the waterway on the south there. And we see a view of the backside of the operator's house. Again, we can see some of that natural cladding. And the colors of the operator's house will be selected to kind of make it a little bit more mute. So although it's an aesthetically appealing structure that ties in well with the area, we don't want it to detract from the bridge itself, which would really be the focal point of this project. So here we see a rendering looking east along Route 36. So this is what we expect to see if we're traveling along the roadway. You can see that there will be those components of the bridge above the roadway that you'll travel under. What we're seeing here is the backside of the concrete counterweight, but there will also be some other components farther on in the bridge that you'll travel under as well. And then we also have here the operator's house that we can see that incorporates items such as clear story windows along the top to help let natural light in. This structure, we are trying to make sure that we're incorporating sustainable design elements into it, such as those clear story windows that'll provide natural light, but there's also an overhang on the roof line that helps to shade it during summer months so that it doesn't create excess heat in the house. And here we have a rendering of the bridge in the open position looking south, just to give you an idea of what the bridge is going to look like when it's in that open position. So you can see that both the bascule span with the roadway as well as that upper link arm move into a near vertical position to provide the opening for the waterway traffic to pass through. So one of the things that DelDOT is looking to solicit public feedback on are color options for the bridge itself. So we have three alternatives to present here. Both of them are comprised of a primary color with a complementing color. So this first option here is blue for the major structural component. So the bascule span you can see will be that blue color, as well as the A-shaped tower, and then the upper arm. The majority of that would be blue as well. And then those complementing components include things such as the element across the top tower. You can see that large circular section, as well as the hydraulic cylinders, which are on the inside of those A-frames to operate the bridge, and then the forward link arm as well. In this case would be that white color. The second color option that we see here is brown for the primary components, including the span, the A-frame, and the link arm, complemented with gray for those secondary components, the forward link, hydraulic cylinders, and some of those other smaller components. And then the last color option here is a teal and yellow combination. So the teal would be the primary color for the components, complemented by a light yellow color for those secondary components, the forward link arm, hydraulic cylinders, etc. So those are the three color options. And again, DelDOT will be looking to get feedback from the public on these options, which can be submitted through the form available on the project website, which we'll provide at the end of the presentation here. So next we wanted to get into the impacts to the public. We'll break this down based on the different modes of transportation, so vehicles, boat, etc., just to give you an idea of what the potential impacts due to this project will be. So next we wanted to go ahead and walk through a rough sequence of construction just to give you an idea of what's going to take place for this project to be completed. So we've got two blue shapes here. These are to represent the existing swing span as well as the existing operator's house. So the first thing that's going to happen is the contractor is going to come in and mobilize to the site. This will include some barges to house both construction equipment as well as materials for construction. Next, they'll go ahead and close the roadway. So the roadway will be closed for the duration of construction for this project to build the new bridge. And then there will be some additional mobilization. We're expecting that they'll be using cranes at both abutments to assist with that demolition and construction efforts. So the next thing will be to go ahead and demolish the existing span. This could be done a number of ways. It could be rotated in the open position, as I just showed there, to demolish in pieces, or they might float it out in larger chunks from the closed position. But regardless, this will have to be coordinated with the Coast Guard, any requirements for closure of the waterway for that to take place. So they'll go ahead and remove the existing bridge, as well as the existing operator's house, and that includes the foundations for both as well. Once those are removed, they'll be ready to start installing the new foundations. So this includes seawalls along both abutments, as well as wrapping around the operator's house on that west side, as well as foundations for the new bridge itself within the waterway. And then also the new operator's house, there will be a foundation, but the whole operator's house will be constructed as well. That's something that can really be done throughout construction, as the bridge will be the primary component that's going to lead to the overall schedule for the project. So on the bridge side of things, they would next come in and install these new approach spans that'll be on either side, the fixed spans. And then from there, they can erect the new A-frame towers for the movable bridge, and then go ahead and erect the remainder of the structure, including the span and the upper arms, install the mechanical components, and tie the whole thing together so that it's once again operational, and we can go ahead and open the bridge back up to vehicular traffic as well. So they'll demobilize their equipment from the site. then they can go ahead and reopen the structure, and then demobilization of the equipment in the water can happen after the bridge is reopened to traffic, just to try to limit that roadway closure as much as possible. So that's a rough idea of what the construction sequence will look like for this project. So using that construction sequence as a starting point, there's probably some questions of what are the impacts going to be to the public throughout the construction. So we broke this down into a couple different categories. The first one here being impacts to mariners. So there will be temporary closures of the channel throughout construction. This will be for things such as when they're demolishing the existing bridge, when they're driving piles for the new bridge or floating in major pieces. We will be trying to maintain access via boats as much as possible, but there will be some required closures that'll have to be coordinated. Additionally, there's going to be work barges used for the project, like I showed in the previous slide. This could be barges for equipment, but also floating in materials. So there could be a number of barges working in the area that might limit the width of the waterway there. So the clearances for the bridge, for the new bridge, I should say, will be either increased or maintained at the existing. So the horizontal clearance as well as the vertical, it won't be getting any smaller. If anything, those will be increasing. Also note here that there's going to be some potential restrictions to dock access. So this is primarily related to those work barges. As they're moving around with equipment and materials, they might have to block some of the access to some of these docks in the area. And then lastly here noting that the contractor is going to be ultimately responsible for coordination and compliance with all U.S. Coast Guard rules. All right, so next I'm going to talk about impacts to right-of-way around the bridge. So first up, the boat launch to the north of the structure will likely be impacted. The contractor might be using that to bring in equipment and material. So from time to time, they'll be using that boat launch to load things onto the barges and float them down to the structure. And then also docks and the waterfront areas around the bridge. Again, they'll be using these work barges for the equipment and materials that might block access to some of these docks and waterfront areas. Also, I wanted to mention that access to the adjacent property owners will be maintained throughout construction. So, nobody's driveway is going to be blocked for the construction efforts. Those will all be maintained throughout construction. There will be some temporary and/or permanent utility relocations for this project. One example is an overhead wire to the south of the existing bridge. That'll have to be relocated because one of the poles conflicts with the location of the new operator's house. So relocation will be required there for one example. There will be some new right-of-way required for the new operator's house. So on the southwest side of the bridge, kind of where the new operator's house, where the existing operator's house is, the new operator's house will be in the same vicinity, but it's going to be a little bit larger. So there will be some right-of-way required to construct that. And then there's also going to be some impacts to construct traffic control devices. So there will be some stop gates right adjacent to the bridge that'll be constructed, as well as some warning gates and lights a little bit farther back, a few hundred feet back the roadway. So there will be some construction impacts to construct those elements. So next up, for the traveling public who typically traveled this roadway, there will be a detour in effect. As I said, for the duration of construction, the road will be closed. So here I wanted to take a look at the detour around this bridge. So this is a detour assuming you'd be starting, for example, on the west side of the bridge and needed to get to the east side of the waterway. So you'd start on Route 36 and travel to the west out to Route 1. You'd travel south on Route 1 and then get off on Slaughter Beach Road, which you would then travel down to Bay Avenue, which then brings you back to the bridge. So the length of this detour from one side of the bridge to the other is just under 15 miles, and the anticipated duration is 20 to 25 minutes for the full detour. And just one other thing of note here, the volume of detoured traffic coming off of Cedar Beach Road is not expected to cause any backups on SR1. So next we're going to talk about bicycles. So this area is on a bicycle route, so you can see on the map on the right here that the blue line represents a regional bicycle route, and then right at the structure itself, it actually transitions to a connector bicycle route with a bikeway. So as we said earlier, the new bridge is going to incorporate a shoulder/shared use with bicycles, so it'll actually improve access for bicyclists crossing the structure and improve safety. But throughout construction, again, the bridge is going to be closed, and therefore there will be a detour that'll be required for bicyclists. This detour will be very similar to the vehicular detour we just talked about, with the one main exception being that SR1 won't be used, so some other roadways will be utilized there. And this detour will be signed for bicyclists. So lastly, we wanted to mention impacts to your emergency vehicles, public transportation, and school buses. This will primarily be related to coordination with these entities to let them know about the project, when the roadway is anticipated to be closed, and making them aware of what the detour routes are so they can plan accordingly. So this will include emergency vehicles, both the Memorial Fire Department, as well as the Delaware Emergency Management Association. For public transportation, there are no DART routes currently accessing these roadways, but there will be coordination with DART for paratransit access. And then lastly, for the schools, there will be coordination with the Milford School District. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. And at this time, we'll go ahead and open things up to questions. But first, just wanted to note that, for those who might be watching the recording of this presentation at a later time or think of questions later, you can use the contact listed here, the Del.Dot Community Relations with the phone number posted. And also wanted to mention the project website is listed here. So this is where you can go for the most up-to-date information on the project that'll be updated throughout the project's life. And also this is where you can go to find the recording of this presentation, as well as other boards and materials available. And also you can access the survey where Del.Dot's looking for feedback on the project, including those color options that we mentioned earlier. So with that, we'll go ahead and open things up for questions. Thank you.
Okay, it's not all the time that we get to replace a movable bridge like this at Del.Dot, so we're excited. I'd like to open it up for questions now. Before we do that, I'd like to just reiterate again the project website. At the bottom of the page, there is a link for comments and feedback for this project. If you click on that, it's a short survey that'll have some questions that'll be helpful to us if everyone fills out. In order to ask questions, you aren't able to unmute yourself. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a smiley face that's for reactions, and you can click on that and raise your hand. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. And once you raise your hand, I'll be able to unmute you and you can ask your question. There are also some questions in the chat box that we will read as if there aren't any questions. So I see here Larry has a question, so I will unmute. And hi, Larry, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Same thing I typed into the Q&A. Images don't seem to show any separation between the bike pedestrian lanes and the traffic lanes. Will there be some sort of railing or barrier there? I go across the existing bridge, either walking or on my bike. It feels quite unsafe relative to the traffic because there's more restriction. People don't really slow down that much, so it feels pretty unsafe to cross the existing bridge. So would that be addressed in the new one?
No, we won't have any physical separation between pedestrians. There won't be any physical separation between the travel lanes and the shoulder. I do believe that the existing bridge doesn't really have much of a shoulder on it, and the new bridge will have a more significant shoulder.
Is there any reason why you can't put some sort of railing there?
It would widen the bridge, but we can discuss that. We can look at that.
Well, it really wouldn't widen anything. If you've got presumably paint a stripe on the ground and just having some sort of bridge or cable there, make it obvious to a car that it's wandering into the bike lane. That would increase
Yeah, I
the-
mean, it would have striping for sure.
Yeah, the stripe doesn't stop a car from running you over. Okay, and you don't need to widen the bridge any to put something, vertically above that stripe. It doesn't have to be anything very solid, or even better, it's the little ridge, like 3 inches high along that stripe, some sort of rubberized thing. So if the car wandered into the bike lane, the car would know it.
Right. We'll look into that. It's definitely a consideration especially if there will be more pedestrian facilities in the future. So yeah, it's something we can look into. Okay, thank you for the question. Next I have Jim and Ethel White, so you're unmuted.
Hi, this is James White. How are you?
Good.
Good. I own the property on the north and west side of the bridge, which I have 450 feet of bulkheaded docks there. Right next to the bridge is 200 feet of steel bulkheaded with piling, which I rent out to different customers to tie their boats up. I see where you are going to need more room, and it looks like you need some of my property. I don't know if it's temporary or it's going to be permanent. And I see where you have a barge tied up in my dock for the work site. I'm kind of curious as how this is going to impact my property.
I can take
Okay.
that one, John, if you'd like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
On the northwest side of the bridge there, where you're referring to, at this point, we are not anticipating any permanent right-of-way takes on that property. There will be temporary construction easements required to perform some construction efforts. I think I mentioned there during the presentation, there's going to be some warning gates and some stop gates for the bridge that'll be constructed on the right-of-way, but there likely be some construction easements just to do that work. And then in terms of the bulkhead, it's up to the contractor what equipment they would be bringing in. But again, there would be some temporary construction easements required within that area, and the contractor themselves would be determining, what type of equipment and what size barges they'd be using and what space they would occupy.
But you can't.
I have a 220-foot well there that is surrounded by Jersey barriers. It's off of the current right-of-way by about 12 or 14 feet. My tieback system, first state crane put the bulkhead in. I have 1-inch rods tying back the bulkhead 30 feet back with a poured dead man and piling every 6 feet for the tieback rods. There's 66 yards of concrete poured there in the 200 feet. And I do not want any heavy equipment running over my well that runs to the house, and also the tieback rods to do any damage to them. And if so, who's going to repair and replace it? And a barge tied up in my dock, any damage done to the decking, the dock or the piling, what's going to happen there? And we are in the process of building a new home there. It is soon to be painted and finished. It's been under construction since June. These are my concerns as to what type of equipment they're going to bring in on my property. I don't want any damage done to the bulkhead.
Okay, yeah, Mr. White, we'll definitely be in contact with you to coordinate, the temporary easements that we'll have and the type of, work that we'll be doing on your area. Okay, so thank you for the information. We'll move on to the next question. Next, I have Kathy Locke. You're unmuted.
Thank you for taking my question. I was just curious to see if we had better feel for when the project might begin and how long it would take again? How long that bridge, the roadway would be closed? Last I recall, we were talking about a year.
Yeah, so we expect to begin sometime in early 2023. And the duration, about a year. Is John, do we have any new information on the schedule?
The construction schedule is still being developed, but yeah, our preliminary estimate was around a year.
Thank you. And then again, would you mind putting up the last page of your presentation so I could write down the website? I missed it.
Yes, let me. Share. Okay, do you see it?
I do. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, next we have Julie Wagner. You're unmuted.
Is that me? Okay.
Yeah.
Question as to the widening of the bridge. If you do widen the boat traffic area, which is a good idea, will it be like the same from each side? So, or would if you're talking 3 feet, is it going to be 1.5 feet wider from one side and 1.5 on the other? Or the whole 3 feet are coming from the one side of the creek? Do you know that yet?
Julie, thanks for the question. So any changes to the channel will have to be coordinated with the Coast Guard. So we can't really say at this point what their ruling would be and what they would be allowing. I believe that initially we were assuming that the channel would be widened to the west side. But again, that's all going to have to be coordinated with the Coast Guard.
Okay, and then my other question has to do with the overhead wires you said that are going to have to be moved. That is going to be moved as in into a different location or run underground?
So we're just beginning coordination right now with the electric utility at this location. So ultimately it would be their decision where they'd like to relocate, whether that be underwater or just relocating that pole and staying above ground.
Okay, and when will those type of answers be available?
John, I believe we were looking to have an additional public meeting in the future. I assume that would likely be when providing additional information.
Yeah, so in the next few months, we would know that. Our next meeting, we would have, we'll have a second meeting just like this one with you guys in the future, probably middle of next year. So about a year from now, maybe, something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any more raised hands. So I think we have a few questions here in the Q&A that we can answer. One is, what is the height of the bridge for large trucks to go through? So what's the clearance we have here?
Rodney, I'll defer that one to you. Do you have the clearance handy?
We're asking about the vehicular clearance to the counterweight.
Correct, for large trucks to go through, yep.
Garrett, I believe we had talked about setting that at, what was it, 14'6", or you know if that was nailed down?
The Del Dot requirements for that is 14.5 feet, and that's what we'll be looking to minimal have at this location. So 14 foot 6 inches or above.
And that's, again, that's DELDOT's standard for this type of roadway. Okay, the next question I have here is, will construction noise level impact residents on Plum Beach Drive? John, could you just speak a little to the level of noise impacts that we'll have during construction and the duration of those?
So the primary, say, noise generating items are going to be when they're performing some of the heavy construction, primarily pile driving. You know, the contractor will be limited as to when they'll be able to perform those. Certainly wouldn't be so in the middle of the night or anything of that nature. So all of that will be coordinated, and there will be requirements that the contractor would have to abide by. Rodney, I'll defer to you again if you want to elaborate, or I don't know if we're at this point able to speak to the duration of those efforts.
Correct. Most of the activities that would have a noise generating effect would be the foundation construction, and that would be the pile driving or the installation of the sheeting along the abutments, or for the bulkheads. Those items typically go fairly quickly once they get started, and they can be done sequentially, so that we would anticipate that it would be a short duration of those activities.
Right, and I'd like to emphasize that we wouldn't plan any night work at this point for this construction. Okay, I have a raised hand here from Lawrence. You're unmuted.
Yeah, my concern is the overhead wire. You guys are going to spend $27 million on a aesthetically pleasing bridge. That's correct, right?
Yes, that's the anticipated construction cost based on.
And we're going to have an overhead wire there. Is there any way that you guys can push the utility company to send it under the creek?
Well, short answer is no. I don't believe we can make the utility company go underwater.
Yeah, well, it seems kind of crazy to spend $27 million on this aesthetically pleasing bridge and have an ugly overhead wire right next to it. So that's just my comment on the wire.
Okay, that's noted. Thanks for the comment.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Any other raised hands?
And I think there was one other question in the Q&A touch on. Someone asked a question related to visibility for the operator and if it would be better to raise the lighthouse end of the operator's house to a second floor in the glass section. I can respond to that one at least initially. We looked at some different alternatives for the operator's house. One thing of note here, as I mentioned, the mechanical electrical components for the bridge will be raised above the flood elevation. The operator's house itself will also be maintained above the flood elevation, so it's going to be a little bit higher than the existing house, which will provide a better view. There will be cameras used to supplement any views that can't be captured clearly from that end of the operator's house where the operator would sit. But in terms of elevating to a second floor, I think that would actually make the view a little bit worse because of the Dutch Bastille style of this bridge. We do have that counterweight up top as well as the forward link arm, which I think in the closed position would actually obscure the view a bit more for the operator. So that's all been studied in terms of view sheds, and like I said, we'd be providing cameras to capture any blind spots that might be present. That answers that question.
Okay, thanks, John. I see here Julie Wagner has her hand raised. You're unmuted, Julie.
Okay, one more question. We have currently, with the current bridge, when we get really cold weather, And when it turns, it can freeze. The structure freezes. With the new bridge, where the landing occurs, will there be a chance of it getting frozen, stuck, so it can't be lifted? Or how is that addressed?
Rodney, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yes, good question. The current system uses a mechanical drive system, which is located under the bridge, which is subject to water and to humidity, and it does get exposed to that and freezes. The new system will have a completely different drive system. It will use a hydraulic system, which will be located in the control house, and will be regulated temperature-wise, both for heating and for cooling, so that the cylinders and the fluids are maintained at an operable level throughout the year. And then, of course, actually on the structure itself, we detail things in the design to try to eliminate any places where water could accumulate and freeze in place.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do you see any other questions, John? Q&A?
About that. I think that's all the questions, John. There was a comment about the color of the bridge, so maybe just again to remind everyone that the survey is available on the project site, that you can provide that feedback. That is one of the questions.
Yeah, and there is a separate sheet on the project website with just the 3 color options that you can refer to before you take that survey. So any other questions? If not, we'll just give it a minute to see if there's any more, and we will end the meeting. So I'll just give it a few seconds. So, okay, thank you everyone for attending. If you could fill out the survey for us, that would be helpful for us from feedback. You can leave additional information on your survey if you wish. The project website has contact information for you to submit more questions if you need more information. For the property owners surrounding the bridge, we'll be contacting you within the next month or two to discuss the impacts to your property and further coordinate that. So with that, have a good evening, everyone, and thanks for attending.